Sweet. Hello, everyone. Today is Tuesday, 23rd, 2024. This is a meeting of the SIG Network Policy API subgroup to subgroup to SIG Network. This is a CNCF sponsored meeting, so please follow the rules, which basically boils down to be nice to everyone and First up on the agenda is from
Is it
Raul talking about
only for
the
me, or is
FQDN.
Andrew breaking up?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's breaking up for me too.
I thought it was
Oh.
me.
Any better now or still breaking up?
A little bit better.
Let's see. My bandwidth may be playing with me. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, if I get spotty, just let me know. I was just saying Raul's first up on the agenda, talking about it, FQDN and PEP, which should be pretty much there. Raul, do you want to run through some of the last little topics you want to discuss here? Could y'all not hear me?
I think Raul is not here today, is he?
That's the problem. Okay, perfect. I'm struggling between screens here. Okay, so I'll just run over what Raul has in the agenda. We're talking about the agenda from here. Here's the Google Doc, and we are talking about this PR. Sweet. So he's updated the CAP, just with a couple things from the outcome of last time. So we talked a bit in the last meeting about what star is going to mean here. He's supposedly updated it to match one or more labels, and also make sure that it only matches a prefix. So I need to go back and take another pass here, but I think it's just a call for everyone who's been reviewing it to go give it one final look. I saw Antonio chiming in there too, so thanks for doing that, Antonio. That was super awesome. Is there any questions I could possibly help with the FQDN selector cap and PEP? I know I'm not the owner of it, so I'm not the perfect person to answer them, but
I'm looking at the rename of FQDNs to domains. Should that be domain names?
I think it might have been a comment from me that nudged that change. I just thought that FQDN might fall foul of the sort of Kubernetes naming norm of trying to avoid really big abbreviations. And it's kind of on the borderline of whether everyone would know what it means, but maybe they would. But I don't think I suggested any particular resolution. I think we might have called it domains in our policy. I can't remember.
I like the
Yeah,
rename in general. Just
Yeah.
just a suggestion. I don't mind domains also, I think.
I was happy with as long as it wasn't FQDN. I did think that was a little low level for this API. Domain versus domain names. I guess that's kind of opinion. I don't know what's worse or what's better off the bat, but domains is all right with me, unless you feel strongly about domain names, Nadia, and we can comment accordingly.
No, not really.
I can't call to mind what the difference between a domain and a domain name is, but if there is a technical difference, maybe we should jump for whichever one is technical, because I think they're both good from a user point of view. If one of them is technically incorrect, maybe we should avoid it.
Nah, I mean, it's just how many letters from FQDN you want to take to the new name. the DN is like the domain name, I think so.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
the only perfectly correct one is FQDN, I think. So then it's just like we decide how we want to simplify that. I think it's fine as soon as we have some docs saying what is actually accepted.
Okay, sounds good. I can look and see if it matters. I don't think it does. So we'll leave it as that for now. Essentially, like, I think that one's pretty much ready to go in. I'm gonna give it one final review. So if folks who have been involved could give it a pass, this week, that'd be super awesome. And I won't merge it until like all the important conversations are resolved. So if there's
But
stuff folks want to do.
one important thing for these things that we found in Kubernetes, reference the RPC, because you are going
Okay.
to get people say, "Oh, this RPC, whatever thing, whatever," just and this is always a problem in Kubernetes. Somebody comes and say, "Oh, I want to use hyphens." I don't know. Language is here. We had this discussion right recently
Yeah.
with the hyphen thing, or I don't remember. So if you just put the RPC, at least you have a common ground. Otherwise, you are going to have a debate. And if you start validating with something, then losing in validation or making more strict is going to be complicated. And so my advice is that is just pick one RPC, one of these, and say, okay, this field is whatever based on this.
I agree.
Yeah, very good point. And we don't
I'm
have
gonna
an RFC
leave.
actually that we want to reference. I think we discussed it last time.
Yep. I'm just leaving a comment to that accord on the NPEP so that doesn't get lost.
And I actually do have an unresolved comment there, so hopefully it will be fixed soon.
I saw that.
Some mistake in the
Yeah, I
records.
was hoping to talk to Raul about that today. I assume he just got busy and couldn't make it today. So I'll try to follow up with him offline and just poke him about that comment and let him know what we talked about here in regards to FQDN and PEP today. Okay, cool. Anything else on FQDN for right now? Okay, awesome. That means it's over to you, Antonio, to kind of give us the intro to some awesome work you've done around an upstream implementation.
No, this is the test started failing on network policy, and I had time to say, okay, let me try to play if I can do something. And I really like it how it looked like. It's a pretty simple approach. You just it seems that iptable has some magic that is able to send the packet to user space and then let the user space to decide what to do with that. And this makes the implementations pretty simple, right? Because you just need to break with you just get the packet, you start the fields, and you then work with the selectors and informants, and you don't know how to deal with all the complexity of moving the semantics of network policies to the data plane implementation.
Yeah. Can you step back and give? I think a lot of people on the call don't even know what this kind of sandbox is you created. So Kube Network Policies. Can you just give them the primer?
Okay, this is a project to implement network policies. I mean, it's just to have something to have CI. That's something that is very simple and works. And because it's very simple and network policies was very easy to implement, I want to use it for admin network policies too, because I remember to talk with you, some of you in QCons and say, oh, we don't have some implementation that we can use for CI, and then this will simplify things. So that's why I'm here. I'm
Perfect.
just almost finishing the admin network policy part. What I will need help is to understand how do you run the test. I don't know how do you run because I want to add CI. And I want to finish admin network policy. And then once I have it stable in the CI in Kubernetes and in the CI with this, I'm going to move to a more maintainer mode, and I'll let you want to implement this new base, I don't know, baseline, whatever thing, right?
Yep.
You just go ahead. The DNS, you can implement DNS. It's easy. You get the whole packet, you can parse it. I have a branch with that.
Perfect.
And that, I mean, I just wanted to keep it very stable, and I just need from you help on getting admin network policy merge test and with CI,
Okay.
and then you can implement these prototypes or work with it. It's very simple. The cool thing is that it helps you to prototype quick.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. Like I was really excited to see this, and thanks so much for bootstrapping it. I think like upstream today, for folks who don't know, we have a bunch of performance tests written, but we aren't running them against anything upstream, and this will be the perfect tool to do that. I think Antonio, like we're happy to step in and help out wherever, and obviously I think you have the right approach, like moving into a maintainer role and letting us kind of iterate with more any features we implement. So Surya is the owner of Surya and Yang really are the owners of most of the conformance test stuff. So I'm sure between those two, we can help bootstrap getting those up and running.
Yeah, I can help you with the entry point into how to run the tests that we have today. And I'm also hoping that your implementation will help us improve our tests as well. So I can work with you on that. I already see that you have IPv4 and IPv6 E2Es in the Kube network policies repo. What are they running? Is it network policies E2Es from core Kubernetes or?
Right. Yeah, okay. I don't do anything without testing.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I cannot develop without a test. So right now it installs a kind cluster, one with IPv4 and one with IPv6, and run the suite that we have in Active, right?
Yeah. One of the challenges that we have when we add new tests upstream for conformance is because we don't run it in our CI, sometimes we end up writing flaky tests which merge, and then we are in that situation where we have to go back and fix it. So I'm hoping with your implementation, which is in Kubernetes 6 repo already, we can help fix all those glitches also and have something stable.
Okay. Yeah, that's my goal. Is I want to create the GitHub action template, right? And then you can copy over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you can copy. I mean, what are you using there? I prefer to use GitHub Actions and
yeah, GitHub Actions sounds good. And it's literally just make conformance and then it runs the whole test from the repo. So I think with the actions, it should be able to invoke it.
Because it's faster for me. Then if you want to do more experiments and everything, you need to move to Pro. But as first stage, then if you can take some time tomorrow morning with me to go through the CI and get it done.
Yeah, I can help you with it. Yeah, let's maybe meet.
Yeah, just it's going to be faster.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I can explain whatever we've done so far, and I think you can do the entry point with GitHub Actions, and then we can build on top of that.
Yeah. Well,
Nadia, you have a hand raised.
Do you have any question?
Yeah, I have a question. I think the admin network policy PR is still work in progress. So do you just need help reviewing that, or do you need help finalizing that also?
I'm almost done. I just finished it as we speak. I think that I talked with Anguilsi this morning for you. I told him that I really like the fact that the policies are like a union. You cannot set multiples at the same time. That simplifies a lot the implementation. And well, now I see that there are a lot of selectors. I don't know if there are many or not. I find a bit weird in the terms that it's not symmetric. So egress has more selectors than ingress, but it's just impression from 1 hour today and 1 hour the other day on that. But I really think that it's pretty neat. Really, congratulations for your work.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's awesome to hear that from you, obviously. So I think I can speak for everyone here. That's good to hear. And hopefully it just keeps getting better. That's our goal.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Easy to read, easy to understand.
Okay. And like, so Antonio, because you've kind of looked at this, and you're probably one of the first other SIG network folks to get really involved, like we're gonna be cutting another release here soon. Is that something I can assign you to kind of look at, just to give the final +1 from SIG network side?
Yeah, what we were talking the other day is we need to get that is we need this API review stamp,
Yep.
and it's something that I'm planning to work on that to get that status I didn't get, but
Okay.
assign it to me because it's good. Then we look for someone with the superpowers. But I do the first
Sounds good.
pass, and then we see here. I think so.
Yeah.
We do the first pass, and after a few cycles, I think that we can
Perfect.
be promoted to API reviewers and then simplify
Okay.
this.
Yeah, that's what I was planning on. So sounds good to me. Thanks for your time. That's awesome. Do folks have any other questions here for Antonio's new tool, or? Sweet. Well, yeah, thanks again, Antonio. This is awesome. Thanks, Surya, for stepping up and helping out, getting those conformance tests running, and I'm excited to take a look and play with it too. Okay.
I'm going to drop.
Oh.
Sorry
Yeah, no worries.
for-
No, you're good.
We keep talking each other. Bye.
Yep. Thanks. Bye. Sweet. Okay, that's awesome news. Good feedback from Antonio, which makes me feel good. So next up, I saw some new stuff on the agenda. Awesome. I'm gonna pass it over to Hunter for some policy assistant updates. I've been seeing PRs flying by there. So yeah, Hunter, it's all you. Oh, you're muted, Hunter, if you're trying to talk. You're still muted. Let's see. I wonder if I can unmute.
Says
Can
you've
other
got a
folks hear me?
settings issue
Oh,
in
cool.
the chat.
Cool. Yeah. Settings issue. Yeah, no worries. We'll give them a second. The Zoom app, desktop app, is definitely one to contend with. In the meantime, is there anything else folks want to talk about today? If not, we can
Yeah,
run through
I
Hunter's
had
stuff.
a quick question for Yang while we are at it, while we wait for Hunter to
Yeah.
fix his mic. In Antria, when you create admin network policies at the same priority, do you allow the policies to be applied and then call it undefined if there are overlapping rules? Or do you prevent users from creating ANPs at the same priority to begin with?
I think in the API specification, we didn't explicitly disallow users to do that, right? So I
Yeah,
don't
we
think
didn't.
I don't think there's any admission webhooks or whatnot to prevent users from doing it.
Okay.
Hey,
So
Andrew, I'm back. Sorry, but you guys can continue.
No. Yeah, just let them finish. Thanks. Sounds good.
Yeah, no,
I
all
can-
good. I think I got what I wanted. Yeah, I was just thinking, so in OVN Cube, we did that kind of a hack to not allow users to create policies at the same priority. And then Dan raised a good discussion on GitHub, and now I'm rethinking that decision to go back and actually allow users to do it, but then do a documentation saying you need to be careful to not shoot yourself. Because if you do write overlapping rules, then we don't guarantee which one takes effect.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the original decision was that in terms of, you know, when we write admin level policies, it might be that people wanted to group a certain admin level policy objects in the same priority, so that because they all pretty much, I don't know, mean the same thing, but those admin level policies are applied to a different set of namespaces. So they're actually disjoint with each other, even though they have the same priority. So they would never kind of like interfere with each other. So that's why, you know, when people create a bunch of AMPs and the same priority, it would be fun if they actually know what they're doing. But you know, once two policies actually contradict with each other, that will be a problem because we don't know what the data path will do, right? So I think that's why at the end of the day we were like, we don't at the API level disallow people to do that. Otherwise it will be, you know, the number of AMPs you can create basically one-to-one maps to the unique priorities that we define in the API, which is an arbitrary number like 1,000 right now, right? But you know, obviously nobody's gonna create 1,000 AMPs in the cluster to begin with. But I mean, I think we're just you know, letting people having a little bit more flexibilities here, unless there are use cases where people say, hey, this is really confusing, and we actually I just think that one AMP should only map to one priority, then we can maybe revisit this. But to not to digress, but on the entry side, I don't think we do anything with it right now. We just let user create same priorities AMPs if they want, and if the traffic do interfere with it, we just say the behavior is undefined.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Ian.
I
And
can tell
secondly, this.
you. So I can tell you what Calico will naturally do with that situation. Our implementation's in progress, but I can tell you what will happen when we map it onto our internal policy model, if you like.
Yeah, sure. That would be awesome.
Yeah, so we allow people to create multiple policies at the same priority, and then we just use a tiebreaker to decide which policy actually has the highest priority. So internally, we have all the policies strictly prioritized. So the behavior is always deterministic, but it's based on a tiebreaker, which is based on the name of the policy. If everything else is equal, if the priority is equal. So if you have the intent to have some higher priority policies and some lower priority policies, then you need to express that by giving them different priorities. But otherwise, we always try to do something deterministic when we render out.
Wait, sorry. When you say name, do you mean alphabetically? So if I want to have a high priority policy, I just name it something like AAA dash policy one.
Yeah, I think we don't document the tiebreaker.
I see.
We don't really want people to be relying on that implementation detail, but
Right.
we just decided that we wanted it to be deterministic what would happen, even though it's not really exposed. I don't see us changing the tiebreaker, but yeah.
So you do give it some kind of internal precedence at the end of the day, right? So even if I have AAA and BBB, somehow the BBB's rules will be weighed less and AAA's will be evaluated first. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you're using Calico Enterprise and you use our UI, then it would be like a drag and drop thing, and we would always order things as you see them on screen. But if you create policies using the API, which to be honest, most people prefer to use the API to manage their policies, then yeah, you could create two with the same priority, and we would tie break it that way. As Yang said, I think mostly people will use policies that don't conflict at the same priority, because they're just doing a big bag of different policies for the same purpose, applying to different pods. And yeah, so I can't think of any time when it's kind of really mattered, because if anyone sees any funny outcome of their policy, then they can always just set an explicit priority that prevents the tiebreaker from kicking in. But that's what we do, and that will naturally carry over to our implementation of AMP.
Yeah, thanks, Sean, for sharing that. It gives a different perspective. I think one of the problems that we have in OV and Cube, and the reason we can do that is we are restricted on the actual priorities. So we do not want to give an internal precedence, because that will take away a subset of priorities that we can give actually to the rules which require the priority. Like, we're a little bit tied down on the number of priorities that are available to us in OVN, let's say. But that's definitely good to know as another alternative option.
Can you have multiple rules at the same priority and then it's kind of non-deterministic what happens, or is it like a hard limit on the number of rules that you have? I think it would be okay for the spec to say it's an implementation detail what happens if you have two at the same priority, but it feels a bit restrictive to for that to extend to not enforcing that policy at all. But
yeah,
Today,
I think
today it's non-deterministic, right? But we never considered putting it as like an implementation detail, which I think could get messy, like from overarching usability. Like, say someone's on Calico and they switch to Oven K, and now their policies don't work the same. But it's something to think about.
Oh,
And like
can
that was
I
one of
ask
the things I
what's-
think overall with network policy, like you ended up having kind of slightly different behaviors between CNIs, and folks would come to us and say like, what's going on? And we would say, well, we didn't specify it in the upstream, and it would confuse people. But something to think about. Sorry, Nadia, I talked over you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what's the point in then allowing like multiple policies with the same priority? I mean, I see that they may be non-overlapping, but you can also just use different priorities. What's the point?
I think the point is, one, we can't prevent it, so there has to be some semantics.
Right.
And two, there are use cases where you can't really expect one person to be coordinating all of the policies, and so you sort of inevitably end up with multiple policies with the same priority, not because they specifically wanted that, but just because people weren't paying attention, or because you deployed software that included its own admin network policy as part of the deployment, and it doesn't know what else you're doing.
Right, but that may break your cluster. I mean, is it a real use case we want to
No,
address?
no, because it's deploying an admin network policy that only applies to its own pods, right? Like,
Well, we think so, but what you said is just that we have network policies at the same priority, not being aware of each other. That doesn't guarantee that they apply to different sets of network policies.
no, I mean,
Of,
clearly,
policy.
if you make two policies at the same priority level that conflict, then you're not going to be happy with the outcome. But in the normal case, they're not going to conflict, and
Right, but wouldn't it be better if actually I don't know about another network policy at this priority, I try create the second one, and then I get an error saying there is already a priority for this.
that we can't make the API do that. We could have it set a status on the admin network policy saying this is not being enforced, but we can't actually have it refuse to create it.
Right, but well, I mean, there are different modes, and I see that we cannot just reject this request, but we can say in all the docs and in our status messages potentially that that is not supported. This network policy that was created later, let's say, is not enforced. And it's different from what
Every time we ever tried to do anything like that in OpenShift, customers ended up complaining. Like, you have to have well-defined semantics, and they all have to work in the most obvious and well-defined way.
Right, but our way is not well defined now. We literally say undefined behavior.
Right. No, what it says now is undefined behavior, and this discussion is about the fact that I filed a bug saying we can't do that. We have to define the behavior more clearly, such that at least in the case where you have two policies that don't contradict each other, you get exactly the obvious result.
So do we want to enforce like name-based or something like that priority within the same priority?
I don't think we need to, like Sean was saying with Calico, I don't think we need to document or require any specific thing. What I want to say is, if the policies don't conflict with each other, then you get the expected behavior. So in that case, it doesn't matter which one gets the higher or lower priority because they don't conflict with each other. If they do conflict with each other, I don't care what happens.
Yeah, that's undefined behavior. And you said we want to define the behavior. And as we discussed, right, moving from one implementation to another, the like implicit priority for the network policies may change. So shouldn't we better just then document it upstream and say how this undefined behavior actually should?
If we have to get to the point of saying when two policies have the same priority, they're sorted by name order, blah blah blah, then that just means that we're giving up on priority as an API essentially, and we need to figure out something else, because that, I mean, like at that point, priority is no longer priority. It's the combination of priority and name is priority, and we might as well just give up and say, well, we won't have priority at all. We'll just have it be sorted entirely by name, right?
Right, but the choice is either undefined behavior, and we already allow this, right? To create multiple network policies, you can do that. So the API allows either undefined behavior or this extra internal priority.
So I'm arguing that we cannot have undefined behavior for all cases where two policies have the same priority, but we can have undefined behavior for the case where two policies have the same priority and rules that contradict each other.
We could probably put bounds on the undefined behavior as well. Oh, sorry, I had a hand up.
Oh, no, I was just saying, why don't we make it really explicit that if you define two policies at the same priority, make sure that they're disjoint. Like, I understand the API cannot enforce validation, but just like we don't enforce validation on a subject cannot be a host network pod, but we just write it right there on the API that, you know, we don't do host network pods on subject. We can just make it explicit and defined that do not do overlapping rules, right? At least it makes it more defined than leaving it undefined.
Yes, I think we should document, and assuming we go with this, we should document in the API that if you have two policies with the same priority with contradictory rules, then it's undefined.
I think
Can you give an example of what you mean by contradictory rules?
So if I have one policy with priority 100 that says allow all connections to all pods, and another one that says deny all connections to all pods.
Yeah, wouldn't the deny just take natural precedence?
No, they have the same priority.
I see, in the ANP. I mean, in that case, I still think deny should win. And I also think that policy validation is incredibly hard because you can't necessarily, like, you're validating policies against an existing cluster, but the cluster is dynamic usually. And so, like, API validation of policies is very difficult to implement. It's not always clear if two policies will end up conflicting.
yeah, I mean, your selector right now might not conflict, but then you add a new pod that has a different combination of labels, and then you have a conflict later. Yeah, I think
Exactly.
Nathan's right. It's pretty much impossible to know if they will conflict.
Yeah, and we had talked about that a lot at the beginning. Like it is impossible to define that and enforce it. So I think there were a lot of good points here. I think we should continue them in the bug issue that Dan has opened. We definitely have to do something. We have to do something soon, I think, is my opinion. So I would like to
Why?
bump the priority on this. Why?
Why does something have to be done?
I mean, I think we have to define it. I think it needs to be explicit, like Dan has said, either way, right? Like today, we literally just the only guidance from the upstream that we give is, look, like it's non-deterministic. Like we don't know what's going to happen, but we also don't provide any guardrails. And from this conversation, like, is that the best we can do?
is it the job of this SIG to provide guardrails to the API, or is it the job of the
Yes.
implementers to do that?
It's the job of the SIG. We should not be defining APIs that have undefined behavior, that have undefined behavior that well-behaved users will encounter.
There are many undefined behaviors in Kubernetes policy. So
I think we should do our best to find a common ground of stuff that all the vendors can agree on. Like I'm pretty sure we all agree that if you have two rules that at runtime don't conflict, we should enforce them both, even if they're at the same priority. And I think we can all do that, and that's no problem if they're one's an allow, one's a deny if they don't conflict. And then it's only in the case where you have an allow and a deny that I think we all have different approaches, and you know, the OVN approach doesn't have enough priority levels to always prioritize deny above allow. It sounds like Cilium can do that. Calico's natural mapping doesn't do that, so it would be quite a lot of work for us to kind of boil all the rules down instead of considering policy by policy. So
yeah, this is what I mean. Like Calico, you know, maybe doesn't want to implement further complex deny precedence, or sorry, just precedence logic after a precedence count. Cilium does do this with having explicit precedence logic around deny and allow interactions, as well as L3, L4 interactions. So like fitting both of those vendors into the same defined behavior, how do you do that?
I think my proposal would be to define, like, be explicit about the things we can be explicit about and that we can all agree on, and then say that the conflicting behavior is I think undefined has the really like nasty C connotation of we could do anything, we could drop your packets just out of spite, or we could send them to the moon. So I don't like that, but it could be the precedence between the rules is undefined, but they will both be enforced. Well, at least one of them will be enforced.
Nadia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just wanted to summarize. It sounds like we want to first say that that no one should use the same priority for intersecting pods, basically, or like to add network policy with the same priority selecting the same pod. But if that happens, one of the network policies will take effect. That's the best we can do, right?
I would say that we should say if two policies have the same priority, they take effect in some order which is not defined. In the
That's
case
what
where
they
they
say.
don't contradict each other, that means that they both apply correctly. In the case where they do contradict each other, that means you because it's possible that like each of them could be allowing some things and denying other things, and or like if there are passes as well, right? Like you could get something where parts of one policy are being enforced and parts of the other policy are being enforced.
Instead of saying contradict, can we say overlap? Because contradict makes it sound like there's some implicit reason why they must not go together. But there are implementations that allow for policies that interact with one another.
But it's not just overlap. Like if both of them say allow X to Y, then there's no problem there, right? It's only when one of them is trying to allow the traffic that the other one is trying to deny that there's a problem.
What if one of them is trying to deny a portion of the traffic that the other is allowing?
Then that's I would say is a contradiction.
So that's like an explicit use case that we have in Cilium, though, where you have like a broad allow, and then we can Swiss cheese the allow with narrower denies.
Sure. You can do that with policies at different, within a single policy, or with two policies at different priority levels. But the question is if you have two policies where you're telling it these are equally important statements, and one of them says allow this and the other one says deny this, then, what do you do?
In our case, in our implementation, deny beats allow.
I think that's a reasonable choice to have made. But I also think Calico's choice is a reasonable choice to have made, and obviously that OVM
Agreed.
team are trying to make the choice.
So I think there's good issues on both sides. I don't think this is something it seems like we have a lot of differing opinions. I would like to at least redirect them to the issue that Dan opens. Let me post that here.
You posted in the doc.
Yeah,
as
I
well
can
as
put
the
it there as well. Yes, for sure. So let me put it there, and then I'll put it here. And then it's 9:45, so I do want to give Hunter some time. So let me just add another little bullet here. Put it in both. Cool. Okay. Hunter, I'm gonna toss it over to you. You got the rest of the time. I do have to hop out, unfortunately. I'm super sorry. So if Surya I made you a co-host, if you could just wrap it up, that'd be awesome. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Hunter. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I think I'll be quick with this. Was just gonna give an update on where we are with the policy assistant. So just to recap, we're creating some user tooling to explain admin network policies and how they interact with network policy. One thing, basically I wanted to just talk about the new North Star for the project. What I think will be the biggest, helpful tool for a user. And if anybody has any feedback, that'd be great. I'll probably continue this project into the coming weeks too. So it's kind of nascent right now. Surya, would you actually be able to open this link and share screen?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks.
I'm still here. I can make you co-host if needed, but Surya's got it.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
And this link, right?
Yeah. So, made this issue based on some feedback at KubeCon. Someone said it would be great if we could have a JSON output that just says what are all of the allowed and denied connections by all the policies in the cluster. So this is a bit of an ambitious goal, but I think it would be great if we could do it. So basically the idea would be what we showed at KubeCon is this screenshot here where you have you specify some pods and some ports that they're talking on, and then you can walk through which policy is allowing them or denying them, and what's the interactions with all the policies. So this is nice, I guess, if you want to dive into a couple pods, but what if we had something that just checked the connectivity of all the deployments in your cluster? And you could even, grab this output and then say, add a new network policy, and then compare the output after you've changed the policies. And so if there's any you could just like check the diff and see if there's any unexpected change from adding your policy. We could refine it so it's not purely JSON, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now for the project. Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about this?
Yeah, I can't unfortunately see if somebody is raising hands. I don't know why the moment I start to share Zoom
You're
kind
good.
of screws up the other view. But yeah, I had a question, which is this check connectivity deployment JSON that you are talking about here. Like initially the policy assistant totally is a simulation, right? Like it doesn't do live traffic or capturing or anything like that. Is that
Yes.
still relevant for this one? Like to me, it sounds from what
Yes.
you described as a fact that you're going to deploy daemon sets on all nodes in your cluster
No.
and then actually track the live traffic, or is this still just a simulation? And then you compare it with when you insert a new ANP, how this changes, sort of a thing.
Yeah, I think just the assimilation one. So this would, I mean, it would have the capability of doing like a kubectl get of all your daemon sets or deployments, but it itself would still just be a CLI. It wouldn't be looking at traffic. It would just kind of check. Like it would literally compare every possible connection, like this deployment to that one and vice versa. And even though that would be like a lot of connections, and this would be a hefty JSON output, I think maybe there could be some use cases where, you know, all of a sudden you add a new policy and these random pods can start talking to each other, like the internet can talk to your backend all of a sudden. So maybe it's worth just checking all possible combinations. That's kind of my thinking right now.
I kind of like the idea behind it, right? Which is also a lot of the enthusiasm we had at KubeCon, which was I wish I could do a dry run before I apply policy to see how my existing connections will get affected. So I like the overall idea. I think +1 to your concern around how this JSON blob would look like on you know the more daemon sets and deployments we have, right? Like the parser might be an issue, or we might need to also provide that via a CLI on how to check it. But I think this is not because of anything else. It's literally because UI is what we need for this, right? Like a way to view connections in a better manner. And we're trying to replace that with the JSON output, which is as good as we can get without UX UI.
Yeah, the way I think about this JSON is just kind of an idea for a data structure, and then we can do whatever we want with the data structure. Like a UI built on top of it or something. Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for
it sounds like
feedback.
a good idea. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else has questions for Hunter?
Okay. Yeah.
I like this point.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know if it's possible yet, but hopefully we can just brute force all the connections. Yeah, and I
mean,
guess
we can
Tom,
get started and then we can always improvise, right? With scale and stuff. I think it's a cool idea.
yeah. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, and one other thought, for what it's worth, what we were talking about with Dan's idea about undefined behavior. If we were to go with saying like, no, rules are allowed. I mean, everything's well defined when the rules are not overlapping. we could have in the CLI some check, like, hey, can you check in my cluster for all these deployments as they are now with their current labels? Is there any like kind of undefined behavior going on with my admin network policies? That could be something we could encourage, like to use your CLI. Yeah.
I think that's a good idea and it should exist, but it can only tell you the current state of your cluster. It won't let you know if you
Right.
can
So it would be
report yourself
yeah.
in the future.
Yeah.
Can I chime in a little bit? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm actually driving, so I can raise hand or something. But
Go for it. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that this were something that we were actually thinking about doing in Etria. And the problem with that is not that it's super complex. It's just that the outcome wouldn't be super helpful because it can only check for the obvious conflicts, but it cannot actually check for implicit conflicts. What I mean by that is that imagine you have two different policies at the same priority, and one rule says anything from label A to B is denied, and the other policy says anything from label C to D is allowed. Well, those two rules doesn't look like conflicting from a static check perspective.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
what if you have a pod in the cluster that has both label A and B and C, and the other pod both has label D and whatnot? Then the policy actually conflict with each other because of the workload that's in the cluster at that moment, right? So this is something that static checks doesn't do well. And if you wanted to extend this to take into consideration how the status of the cluster is, it becomes a little bit more complex, and usually it requires much more effort in terms of analyzing. It's kind of like a mini policy passer or implementer, if you will. So in order to implement the ability to actually check for real-time conflicts in the cluster, you kind of like have to implement half of the feature in, let's say, Entra and other Kubernetes or Calico in order to just do that. So that's what we have been thinking of and decided not to pursue a CLI that does this. But I'm not denying that it will be definitely super helpful. It's just that it could be a little bit complex.
Yeah, thanks, Yang. I think the beauty of it, if we do want to go for it, Cyclonus already kind of has that. It kind of re-implements the network policy engine already. So I think we just with a couple more pieces, we might be able to pull it off with what we have already. So I guess if it could be helpful to a user, maybe I'll create an issue for that. And I'll definitely add that caveat that, or we would have to print out that caveat that this is just for the cluster as it is right now. If anything was relabeled, then it would be potentially invalid. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to maybe create an issue and capture everything that we've discussed and go from there. And maybe we might even end up with more ideas to solve it.
Yeah. Okay.
And thank you so much, Hunter, for bringing that up. I think it is definitely a good idea.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. That's all on the agenda. We have 2 more minutes. Does anyone want to bring up anything that's not part of the agenda? Or Okay, that sounds like a no. Thank you everybody for joining. Have a rest of your day. Have a good rest of your day. See you all in 2 weeks.